Welcome to Creatives in Quarantine. I'm Tiwana Floyd, your host. This week's guest is Stacie Aamon Yeldell, who went from being a young signed hip-hop MC to a master's in music therapy. Stacie's access to creativity is being grounded because the body cannot produce in angst or fear, and she's also a phenomenal vocalist. So give us a listen, like, subscribe, and share.
Thanks, girl.
Hey.
So so we start off with how we met. We met in the Agape Choir.
We met in the Agape Choir, yes.
Yeah. And what was funny, and I told you this, but it was so funny because the day that you auditioned, we sat next to each other in service. And then when you auditioned, I was like, oh, that's a girl that sat next to me. Because, you know, we have to be like, oh, tell your neighbor, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Well, you're amazing, all these things. And then when you got up, I was like, oh, that was the girl. And then you sang, I was like, oh. Yeah, we need her in the choir.
Oh, thank you.
I just wish she was a first soprano so she could sit over here. But no.
Girl, I've been wanting to be a first soprano since I was 3 years old.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for the longest time, I had this belief system that singing high was better, you know, and I don't know why. It was probably because of the singers that I liked, you know, but I just had this idea that having a very low voice, which I used to really have a very deep voice. I can still go there, but I have more resonance and more range because of the vocal training. But back in the day, I had a very low voice and I was also a rapper. So and I had a management team that was also managing a singing group, and they kind of wanted to keep me in my place. Like, well, you know, you're the rapper and they're the singers. And so, you know, you got to be able to sing high and sing like Mariah, you know, flying all over the place. So it was just a belief system that wasn't real, you know, that my vocal teacher helped me to let go of that.
Oh, that's
about 10 years ago.
Let's talk about that because I know you as a singer, but you, just like every other creative, we have so many things that we do and we do well. We're creatives. And especially for those of us who live creative lives, it's easier for us to tap into all those creative outlets. Because they're at our whim. They're ready, waiting for us to turn to them. But I love hearing the story of you being an MC. So tell us about that, because your vernacular is so strong, and I always feel like MCs have to have a strong vocabulary. And it's like lots of times MCs are deemed as stupid or whatever, and it's like, no, you can't rhyme and not have a strong dictionary in your mind and thesaurus. So tell us about you becoming an MC.
Oh yeah, girl. So it all kind of started from me being this misunderstood, sensitive kid. I didn't know I was sensitive at the time. I didn't understand that concept until later in life, that I had this sensitivity level. So for me, I was just kind of pushed around and bullied and didn't really understand why. And I wanted to be liked, and, you know, and I didn't want to fight. That was the thing. I was, you know, I didn't want to get punched in the face. I didn't want to be, you know, and I mean, and they would roll up on me in droves, you know, get jumped, and, you know, so I was really searching for a way to fight back and to claim my space. And so hip hop was at its zenith at that time. And this was probably like 87, 88. And particularly female hip hop was at its zenith. So you had MC Lyte, you had Moni Love, you had Sweet Tea, and, you know, Finesse and Sinquis. It's like this whole group. And I went to that exhibit at the, I think it was the Annenberg, or maybe it was somewhere else, where the hip hop one. And and it was a photo of all the female MCs. And I was like, oh, that was so, I came up in that time, and MC Lyte had just dropped Light as a Rock. And I remember rhyming, you know, over top of her, like, you know, and she was hard, you know, like she was just like telling chicks like, yo, light as a rock, or I should say a boulder, you know, rolling down your neck and pounding on your shoulder, you know, just crazy. And so I started rhyming it, and it started to animate me. And I was like, you know what, I want to do this. And so I was always a writer in the sense that I wrote in a journal. So I started penning rhymes. I was like probably like 7 or 8. And I started penning battle rhymes. And after a while, you know, and I was in a creative arts school. I was in a creative arts school because I was a cellist. And so I was a classical musician in school. And, you know, basically I started rhyming in my little notebooks. And then eventually I, you know, broke one out on the playground one day. And it was at a moment where like, the tension was, it was hot, you know, like I was about to get jumped, and I just kind of threw that book bag down and just started spitting.
Wow.
And everybody just froze, like, oh snap, you know, because wasn't nobody rhyming like that, not girls, you know, it was only
Yeah.
a few, you know.
Yeah.
And then everything changed. Literally, I know people say that's like a cliche thing, but literally my life changed
Right.
because no one ever bothered me again. Like that put me on some status of, you know, that by the way, later on in life came back to bite me because
Okay.
oh yeah, because it was that fame. It was a little taste of what happens when you go on stage and how that transforms people and how you're perceived. And what it showed me, it saved my ass, but it also created almost like a neural pathway of, well, adoration, you know, equals validation. And it's like, oh, I could be validated if I do this thing. I can be adored if I do this thing. So guess what I did? I made it my life's mission at that point to do that thing. And it took me really far in a sense. At 16, I had my first record deal. I mean, it was serious,
I
you
didn't know
know.
that part.
Oh yeah, because I was a part of, because when I got to high school, I then became a part of a creative collective, almost like a fame kind of school I went
Right.
to. And we were all rappers, dancers, singers, and everybody got signed at some point in that group. And then we were in Maryland, so not everybody had success, but everybody had an initial record deal, you know. And I was on Teen Summit's talent show back in the day. If y'all remember Teen Summit, they had a talent show, and it was the same talent show that Escape got founded on by Jermaine Dupri. And Jermaine Dupri offered me a record contract before the Brat. And the management that I had was just so, you know, I guess, not really versed in how to really manage in that way. I don't remember exactly the story. I was 16, but either way, it fell through. And it was my first heartbreak. You know, it was like, 'cause I didn't see anything else other than this happening. Like, I used to write down the rappers' names on my party invite lists, like for my little birthday parties,
Yeah.
because I just did not see any separation between me and them. Like,
Right.
I was like, I am one of them, and you know, I'm famous. I had that whole idea. So yeah, so I lost my first deal at 16, and then from there, going into college, I shifted gears into the business side of music, and I started to work for record companies in college and intern. I was in Atlanta, so Sony and you know, Def Jam, all of these things were kind of cropping up, and I thought erroneously that being on the business side would spare me the heartbreak. You know, so I just ran from my creative self. I ran from my artist self because it was injured at a very young age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking, because at 16, and that was during a time where record deals they've notoriously just been bad for many, many years. So although it was a heartbreak that you didn't get that, it was probably also a savior for you, because who knows what it would have looked like, especially now with so many people from that time are coming out and starting to reveal what they really went through. Then it was probably a good redirect for then you to go into the I guess the behind the scenes as the music executive side of it and learning the business from there.
Absolutely. It took many, many years of therapy and, you know, to get to that point of understanding that, but you're absolutely right. It was just, it would have eaten me alive. It would have destroyed me, you know, and to be honest, I realize now at this time that I had a higher calling in a sense. I can see myself now as saying, well, you know, being a pop star or a rapper would never have been fulfilling. You know, fame was not what I was after.
Yeah.
Actually, you know, again, I was after creative expression. I wanted authentic creative expression, and I wanted to be able to deliver my gifts to the world in a way that was meaningful and impactful. And at the time, the only structure that I had in my mind at that young age was to be famous. And that was how that could happen. But I had to, again, grow and evolve and go through a lot of growth and transformation and inner work to finally realize that that's not the one way. That's not the only way. And it's actually maybe not even the way, at the end of the day, to achieve what I really wanted to achieve, which is, creative expression and service to humanity.
Right. Which is where you are today. But before we fast forward and get to there, because there's so many steps along the way. So you mentioned that you went to school in Atlanta, you said?
Yes, I went to Clark Atlanta University.
Right.
CAU.
Shout out to those folks. And so how did you go from Maryland to Clark, and then you wound up in New York, and now you're in LA?
So I left Maryland as soon as I possibly could, because it was just a very constricting place for me in terms of my creativity. Even though, I did do a lot of great stuff in terms of rapping and creating, I was one of those people that needed to travel to get out, and so Atlanta appealed to me because the music industry was budding. I wanted to go to a Black college. And honestly, I went to Freaknik when I was in my senior year of high school. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go here.
Here.
So if y'all don't know what Freaknik is out there, Google it. It was wild.
That's right.
But and it was the best decision I could have ever made, because I was immersed in such incredible culture. There were magical movements happening musically and creatively in Atlanta when I was there from 94 to 99. It was a very magical time, and it really contributed to the substance of who I became. And I worked in the business side again, because I didn't know it then. I was trying to run from my creative self by becoming this kind of business side. So when I graduated, a couple years after I graduated, I got a job at Atlantic Records in New York City. And that's how I moved to New York.
Okay.
I was an assistant to the product manager. And I figured out really quickly that it wasn't what I wanted to do. It was way more stressful than even being an artist. And there were some other things brewing at the same time, namely another record deal. So I had kind of met someone who heard me sing, because I wasn't singing yet, but he heard me sing, and I was demoing. I was writing and demoing. So even though I was doing business, I was still writing songs, thinking, okay, well, I'll work on the executive side, but I don't want to be an artist, so I'm going to write for other artists. So I was pursuing that at the same time as working at Atlantic. But he heard my voice and said, no, you actually have a great voice. I'm going to introduce you to this producer. And that producer was Eric Sturman, who is from EMD. Mm-hmm. So Eric Sturman heard me and said, okay, you got something here. This was pre-vocal training. Mm-hmm. And he said, we're going to do an album, And so my family bankrolled an album back in the year 2000, had a lot of big name producers on it, including Eric and Akon. And it was like, okay, this is going to happen finally. It was right on the steps of the kingdom, and then it exploded again. And this time it was really, really bad, because I just had so much invested in it. And again, it had nothing to do with me or my talent. It was just some shady business stuff that happened. And so that one kind of took me out in a sense of like, okay, I just spiraled out after that. And it became a very, very dark time. And it was in that time that I did a few interesting things. Like one thing I did during that time that I think is valuable to mention is that I went to audio engineering school. I was in the dark, but I was like, I don't want this to ever happen to me again. I'm going to, sell my car, and I'm going to, get some studio equipment. I'm going to learn how to work it. And I'm going to, take control. So it was always me just trying to take back the control of my creativity. And, just trying to like find some authority in that. And then the other thing that I did that was really the second life-changing thing was that I auditioned for NYU. They had a music therapy master's program, and I didn't know what music therapy was, but I knew that I needed some therapy. I needed some kind of musical healing. And the pivotal story I can tell about that is that when I was in engineering school in my acoustics class, I asked my acoustics teacher, I just want to know why music makes me feel the way that I do. Like, that's what I've always wanted to know. That's why I do everything that I do with music. It's why does it make me feel the way? And he said, well, this is acoustics. So I really can't answer that question. You would probably have to ask a music therapist. And I was like, what? Okay, I'll go ask a music therapist, And I asked him because what I was really asking, now that I know, looking back, was acoustics, I was equating that with like sound healing and vibrational healing,
Right.
which came later in life,
Yes.
you know. So I did go ask a music therapist, and I actually became a music therapist. And so it was that training, getting admitted to NYU and going through the training that helped me to heal my creative injury. Because I got a therapist while I was at NYU who was also a vocalist. And she helped me to understand what all of that trauma was, you know, from 16 years old, what that had done to my creative, you know, self, and how I had basically given away my power to others to validate me, you know, through wanting to be adored and wanting to be on stage. And she helped me to see from some early childhood perspectives what kind of propelled that. And helped me to heal some of the things from early childhood that in early childhood, I'll just say not everything is about getting beaten, you know.
No, yeah.
For me, it was just emotional
yeah.
deprivation,
Right.
distracted parents, and parent who's an addict, you know,
Yeah.
that kind of thing really put me in a position of being a parentified child, meaning that I was really doing a lot to fix and heal my parents, and I needed to be seen and validated. And so that career, you know, really served that purpose. And I'm talking about this because this is a huge thing with a lot of people who are famous or celebrity kids. This is the syndrome,
Right.
you know, that occurs where there's something that happens in the early childhood that creates a trauma or a wound, and then them getting famous fills it temporarily. And then when something goes wrong in the fame, they OD, or you see something dramatic happen. So that almost happened to me. I was almost one of those people that just left the planet because the trauma almost took me out, and it got wrapped up in addiction. But thank God, you know, my therapist, and, you know, when I got to NYU, that healing started to take place. Right. And basically I just began to remember why I was doing it in the first place, and that my creativity is so protected. It's like that part of me, like they say, it's a part of you that's not hurt, harmed, or endangered. Like that part of me that's so pristine. Yeah. And I had to just begin to reconnect to that part of me. And I did so through play, you know, and through improvising, which you're a queen of, you know.
Yeah.
So that's how I got from, you know, from LA to New York. And then I worked as a music therapist in New York for a few years. I worked with, you know, mental health, locked psych units, addiction, really intense communities. And then just decided that I needed to change my lifestyle and live somewhere that was a little warmer. And I had also started meditating, and my spiritual practice was growing, and New York began to feel a little bit dense for me. Yeah. For that thing that was trying to happen. And then there was Agape, which gave me even more of a reason to kind of come this way, you know. So it was everything kind of happened. And I spent some time in Brazil before I got here in LA.
That's right. We got to add that to it.
Yeah, we got to throw that little story in there.
Yeah, you definitely do, because to me, well, first I got to talk about how, you know, I'm glad that you're talking about what music therapy is and your journey to learning about it and then becoming one, because I'd never heard of it until I met you. And as we're talking more about it in depth now, recognizing how important it is for any artist, you know, to recognize what their trauma is around their creativity, but definitely with music, because I feel like there's a lot of injured souls in that arena. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I should say her name, but one rapper right now who's prevalent and on the scene and just letting everybody know how she feels about the past and really on a rampage, but I could see her pain. And hearing you talk about this now, it's like, oh no, that makes sense. Okay, so somebody told you, the acoustic teacher told you to speak to a music therapist. How did you even find a music therapist?
I think I just happened to start Googling, you know, music therapy, and saw that the New York University had a master's program. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, well, you know, I had a bachelor's from Clark, and I said, well, you know, maybe I should just audition. And again, this was me in the darkness. I was just groveling. I was just trying to stay alive at this point. Right. So this was yes, exactly. So this was definitely a divinely inspired idea. And the whole audition process was, you know, was a mess, because I thought it was like a Juilliard thing. So I was practicing. I had taken up because you have to have prereqs. So I started taking guitar lessons and, you know, and I was basically taking guitar lessons on the wrong guitar. You know, it was like a flamenco guitar and I needed to be learning chord structures. And so when I got into the audition, I didn't really have what the requirements were, but they saw something in me, and it wasn't a Juilliard audition. It was about, can you connect music to feeling and healing?
Wow.
And so
question, what is an audition for music therapy?
Right. So you kind of want to go in with either voice or piano or guitar, you know, because you're going to lead and facilitate processes with non-musicians. Most of the time we work with non-musicians. So if you're doing an improvisational group, you want to have one of those instruments, but they also build that into the training. So, you know, we had guitar lessons and piano lessons and in the beginning, you know, of the first year. So so because I was on the wrong guitar, they handed me a djembe drum and they said, play indifferent. And I'm like, play indifferent?
Different?
What? You know, but I was automatically intrigued, you know, because again, it was about connecting the emotion and connecting the healing component in the inherent healing components that are in music, and being able to see if I have the propensity for that. And they saw my wounds. They saw that I was a what they call a, you know, wounded healer. And, you know, wounded healer is, but a lot of us are that, but many people who are drawn to healing fields themselves have some kind of wound. And so that was what the NYU music therapy process was for me. It was learning how to be this healer facilitator while simultaneously healing my own stuff, you know. And I think that's important to note, because I used to think like, oh, I had to be fixed and whole to be able to help people and heal people, you know, but it's always been this simultaneous kind of parallel process of growing and healing through my own wounds, particularly my creative wounds, to be able to then facilitate and assist someone with tapping into their own creativity and using it to heal themselves, you know. And that's why majority of the people we work with are non-musical. You know, you can work with musicians, but music therapy works for everybody in so many different populations, because it's really about what we're talking about. How can we reconnect and help facilitate a person's reconnection to their creative spirit so that they can utilize that creativity to heal themselves and to make themselves whole again? And you can do that through art therapy and drama therapy. And there's a whole umbrella of creative arts therapies. But it's incredible work. It's incredible work. It was the work that was supposed to find me, so that I could heal what needed to be healed from early childhood, really.
Right. And what that has me think about is, you know, most times in any artistry, or just in like people who aren't even practicing their art form or their creative form, but anyone who is constantly trying to make something happen and going after this one thing, and then it just seems to keep failing. And then you don't know why. And so all of that stuff that you were dealing with from 16, the playground, up until now, led you to this music therapy, which led you to the healer that you are. It's like all the things that you needed to go through led you here.
Yes, and I believe that. I mean, that has definitely been my life, and it's still unfolding, you know, in that way, because there's so many other creative avenues that have opened up even since then. But the overarching thing for me that I learned was that to not be attached, you know, to any one way that it's going to look. I mean, realistically, we are multi-dimensional beings. We have unlimited capacity to express and to create. And so the idea is to tune into the gift and to the, you know, for me, I have an access point. So I'm not just willy-nilly creating this and creating that. You know, my access point is kind of what I mentioned earlier, to authentically create and express in service to humanity, really through my voice is most of the time. But through my voice can be singing, that could be speaking, it could be writing, you know, it could be, it could be voice acting. There's so many ways that I can utilize this space to creatively express. And that was what I was missing as a kid. I didn't quite understand that I was that big of a being.
Yeah.
You know, that I could really have multiple possibilities, and that fame had zero to do with it. And that fame actually probably would have killed me, and
Yeah.
it would have deaded my mission before I could even have started.
Yeah, you may have completely left the industry with this dream, with this this missing link in your body. Which happens often also.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. People live on unfulfilled dreams and do something else and are heartbroken and taking it out in all their relationships, and that's a whole nother story.
Oh yeah, that's another call.
Right. And how did you get to Brazil?
So that was an interesting thing because I went when I was 30 on vacation for my 30th birthday for 2 weeks. And I was always drawn to that country for some reason, definitely uniquely, Black people across the sea that speak another language. And I mean, I could always just hear the drums, I don't know if that makes sense, but I always could feel it. And I said, well, I'm just going to go and visit, and so I went for my 30th birthday and then came back. It was great, but then didn't think anything of it for 4 years. And then all of a sudden, when I was gigging in New York City, as an indie artist, this was probably right after I graduated from NYU. I had gone back to being an artist again, but from a totally different space of being a singer-songwriter, because now I knew piano and guitar. So I was being a singer-songwriter, booking gigs. I had a band, and it was fun, but I was doing a lot of work. Anybody who's an indie artist, you're booking the shows, you're booking, rehearsing the band, you're inviting people, writing the songs. And so I was like this one-woman army, and I was just tired. And I said, you know what, I'm going to move to LA. I'm going to change my life. And, but the night I was doing this one gig, we went to this Brazilian restaurant, and I smelled some moqueca, which is like a fish stew, and somebody was speaking Portuguese. And the memory from that trip from 4 years ago just popped in my head. And this very strange voice that I had never heard before, but now I'm very familiar with as being my higher self, said, you need to go to Brazil. And I was like, when? What? I'm a Virgo. I don't just get up and go nowhere with no plan, like why, And so it was this whole thing of me coming out of my Virgo brain to be able to just kind of entertain the idea that maybe I would take this trip to this place with no real agenda, just to have an experience. And so that's what happened. I packed up my stuff and I just got on the plane. I knew one person, a tour guide from when I went before 4 years ago, who I really didn't know that well. And I just let this journey, unfold. And, I had somewhat of a plan. I was going to go to school and learn Portuguese at one of the schools with the host family. And so I did that the first month, which was so much fun, living in the family. But then serendipity, divine providence, whatever you want to call it, began to take over. And I hadn't told anybody, Tiwana, but I had gone there to quit music for good.
Oh, wow.
I was like, I'm done. I'm never going to do it again. I'm tired, clearly this isn't supposed to happen. But then a friend of a friend introduced me to a singer there who heard my music and was like, hey, you should do a show with me. And I was like, okay. So I do a show with him and then do another show with him. And then I get a fan base and then I start doing my own shows and then I get a radio interview and then I'm in Carnival on a float. And, and again, it's this whole thing starts to kind of move, And I have to say that probably was like the next level of healing that had to take place for my creative spirit, because that country has a level of enthusiasm that I had never seen, and a capacity for joy. Mm-hmm. And there's this whole other mystical component to it as well with the African diaspora. And I got the validation in a positive way. It wasn't like I needed the validation, but being able to be at a show and have people, sing with you and dance with you. They don't even understand what I'm saying. I was singing in Portuguese, but then I do these songs in English and they loved the English songs. I was always singing in English and they didn't know, but they could feel it. Yeah. They could feel it, and so that's that connection with the audience. I had never had that before. So that was a huge healing for me in terms of healing my voice, healing my spirit, learning another language, singing in Portuguese, the vibrational experience of that language still for me, and just a very deep connection. And interestingly enough, I met people who stayed. Like I met expats who were like, they visited like I was, and they never left. And let me tell you, I could so see how it could happen, because particularly for Black Americans. There's something in that land that calls us. And then when we finally feel it and taste it and get it, sometimes we just don't ever want to leave. And it's more so, I felt that there than even when I was in Africa. And I think it's because of the diasporic part, the fact that they took that trip too.
Yeah.
Right. So there's something there that, and they have more of their connection to Africa because of the Portuguese were different than the British.
Yeah.
Still monsters, but they let them hold on to some of the cultures. And there's been a big boost of Neo-Africanism in that place as well. So yeah, I had this, this experience, and part of me was like, I don't ever want to leave. But there was another part of me that was really saying, you need to finish the plan and move to LA. Just go and get legs and ground there. And then you can always go back and forth. And I'm so glad that I did that because agape,
Yeah.
because of the next part of my healing for my voice was the choir. That was the next layer of what needed to be healed around that as well. So after that, I would just kind of go back and forth and spend time there. And as soon as I can again, I will always return to that land. I think it'll always be my home, my soul home.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you speak the language.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's nothing holding you back from it.
Exactly. But travel, I mean, we're talking about creativity, just to tap in a little bit to, Julia Cameron's The Artist Way, which I really believe in. One of the things she talks about is these artist dates, and how as creatives, we want to be able to fill our tanks with images and experiences and ideas that are outside of the actual task of what you're creating. And so you want to step away from the task and the goal and have an adventure, right? Basically is what she's saying. And so artist dates can be little solo things you take, and this is what I have my clients do that I work with, that are my creative arts therapy clients. But, travel is like a big artist date. You just go somewhere if you're solo traveling, and it's so good for the creative spirit. And I know a lot of times we can't travel as much as we, want now, but you can get it from taking a day trip. I mean, just kind of coming out of that normal space and filling our creative tanks, by being able to have some kind of, even if it's a micro adventure, what it does is it pulls us out of the mind and it brings us into being very present with what we're experiencing for the first time.
Yeah.
And it's just a wonderful thing to do for yourself, for your creativity, I think.
Yeah. I know for sure, you're the first person to articulate the artist way in a way that now makes me say, okay, I'm interested in that. I've heard it for many, many years. And I think when I typically hear it, it's almost like it sounds like homework and so I don't want to hear about homework.
Understandably so.
But the way you just presented that, and you talk about that all the time. I have my artist date scheduled and things like that. I didn't recognize that the trips also were part of that, but of course that makes sense. And there was one, I'm from New York, but there was one time that I went home, I think it was 2 years ago, and I made that my artist trip. And I was like, this is not about me visiting my family, my friends, or whatever. This is going to be straight an artist trip. And the experience was completely different. Mm-hmm. And every other day I had something scheduled, whether it was a Broadway show or some film. I went for Tribeca Film Festival and I immersed myself by working the festival, but just for a couple of days so that I can also participate in it. But that was the first time I experienced New York in a completely different way. All the years of living there, all the years going back and forth. So I think I'm going to maybe visit that artist way now.
Oh yeah, that sounds great. And I'm so glad you brought it up in terms of being somewhere that because it doesn't have to be somewhere you don't. It can be your hometown. I'm so glad you said that. But you shifted your perspective and your intention and created a new experience in a place you've been that you grew up in.
Right.
So that says it right there. Yeah, it's amazing.
That's good. So, you talked about agape. Because agape has been such a healing place for so many people. Wait, I clicked something. I don't know what I did. What the heck? Oh, there we go. Because agape is a healing place for so many people. Agape International Spiritual Center. When I went there, it was during a time where I was in a people fast, and it was just noisy in my head, and I just needed to stop being around people. But I started to go there, and then sing the choir or whatever. And I was like, they just bring people so much joy. I want to do that. And me being in the closet singer, because I was never the person to get up and take a microphone or whatever. I never even recognized myself as a singer. But my mother grew up playing records, singing in the house. You know, the 70s was the soundtrack, the 70s and 80s, the soundtracks of our life was all that music that was happening. But I didn't recognize that when I got in that choir. And of course, the joke is, if you want transformation expedited, you join the choir. Because everything is compounded in that, and you find yourself really quickly. But I had no idea that I would be healing all kinds of wounds being in that choir that I didn't even know were in me. And so you talk about that. Did you know coming to the choir was going to be a part of that journey for you in terms of healing, another phase of healing?
No way. I had no idea, because I'd never been in a choir.
Yeah.
And the way I came into Agape was a little bit different, in a sense that I had, kind of gone to a workshop with Michael Beckwith and Ricky Byers Beckwith at the time, before I even ever stepped foot into the place. And that workshop was at Omega in Rhinebeck. So there was no connection. I was nowhere near about to move to LA. I was still very much in New York. And I got connected to his teachings, and he was the first person that taught me how to meditate. It was a meditation retreat. I had been trying to meditate for years. I never had been successful because of my brain. And I was able to do it with him. So I was a fan. I'm like, this guy taught me how to meditate. I'm going to go wherever he goes. Next time he shows up somewhere, I'm going to be there. Right. And so that's how I found out about Agape, through him as a teacher, interestingly, and her doing the music that she was doing along with him. Yeah. And so when I did finally physically get to Agape, which was probably 3 years later, of me following his teachings and things like that, I saw the choir, and I knew her already. I had met her because by then I had gone to Bahamas and all these different places where they were doing things. But I had no idea that the choir could be that experience, because I had never been in a choir. And, I was more, and I'd never even been in a group. Like, I was always a solo rapper and a solo singer. Yeah. So I had not had the group experience. And I also wasn't what I would consider the best harmonizer, because I hadn't been in groups, or did I ever really consider myself ever to be anything like a gospel artist, and still don't, interestingly enough. Yeah. That's a certain kind of gift, like jazz singers, that's a training, that's a whole thing. And so I didn't really consider that. But I said, well, let me give it a shot, because not all of the songs that I was hearing were fitting that gospel mold. It was more like inspirational and that kind of a thing. And so, so the funny is really, the really kind of quick funny story about this is that when I went to a Agape retreat in New Year's Eve in Joshua Tree in like 2008, this is before I moved to LA. I was still in New York again, but it was where I decided to move to LA. I was singing along with the Ricky songs at the retreat, and because I had been receiving the recordings of the sermons, because that's what they used to do back then. When you were a distance person, they would send you the recordings. So I knew the songs, sitting there singing the songs, and who became someone that I knew later, but someone I didn't know at the time, turned around and said, hey, you should audition for the choir. You've got a great voice. And I said, oh, no, I don't live here. And she said, and all you have to do is sing, da, 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 da. And I'm like, I live in New York. And she just kept talking over me. Yeah. And that was how I said, you know what? Oh my gosh, these people already know that I'm going to be living here. Clearly, I'm the last person, and so interesting, because it was almost like it had already been told to me that I was going to be in the choir back years before, when I was just at that retreat. So by the time I was physically there, it probably took me two more years to actually audition for the choir. So it's probably 4 or 5 years between when that thing happened and when I finally did. It was just, even then I thought I was just going to kind of just hang out in the back.
Same here. Yeah. I'm here for no solos. I'm here to just be a part of the game. What we doing?
Right. Yeah. But the first New Light Sunday, I was like, it's 6 a.m. because that was when we used to have those 6 a.m. services that we would sing at. Yeah. Literally, it was like I got taken into a side office that I didn't even know existed with a piano. And they were like, hey, if I sing, this was Tim McAfee Lewis. He was like, if I sing, God is so good, what were you going to say? And I was like, huh? And he was like, all right, let's try this again. And it's like 6 a.m. And I'm like, am I supposed to know what you're saying? He wants me to ad-lib something, and I'm like, not a big ad-libber. And so in that moment, I had to put aside all of everything that made me who I am ego-wise.
Yes.
So my perfectionism, my feelings of needing to be prepared, and I have to practice something before it's presented, and I had all these verbal ideas about what it means to be on stage and present something. All of it had to go out the window, because in that moment I had to just go up there and trust myself. I had to improvise, and that became the theme.
Yes.
That was the theme for the whole entire time I was in that choir, was you just have to do it. You don't know when you're going to do it, because you'll get pointed to, and you'll have to go out there and you just have to do it.
Because it's live.
It's live, and you just, you could try. Like I used to try and avert my eyes, like, like she's looking at me, and I'm like, oh.
And she'll get somebody, get her over here.
Yep, and then somebody will tap on my shoulder, So that alone, for me, that by itself, without all of the other magic that we know is there, right? With the songs we're singing, the vibrational tone, the community, all of these things that make it what it is. For me, that was the biggest healing component, was having to say yes, even when I wasn't ready or I didn't think I could do it, to have to say yes to it. And that's how I really learned, how I was as a vocalist. And it's a very similar thread to how I began my healing at NYU, through play and through improvisation and through trusting. That's part of kind of what that started the healing process for me from a creative perspective. Because not only am I Virgo, but I'm also like a classical musician, where I was raised being married to a page. So, when you're a classical musician, you read music,
right? And
it's like, that's what's there, and that's what's going to happen.
Right.
Don't tell me to play what I'm thinking about. What do you mean? I'm playing what's on the page. So I also had to psychologically, creatively come off the page, and that was just a part of the whole thing, and the choir definitely pushed me off the page, for sure. There was no page.
I think we share that same experience, because like I said, I was always this in the closet singer. I didn't even really sing in the house. And so to have somebody all of a sudden have this idea of knowing that I have this gift and pushing me to the front, and I was always terrified, and just like you, averting, if I heard a certain song, like, she usually calls me on this, and whatever, and then she'll come and get you. We're talking about Ricky Byers. Mm-hmm. And so the gift of her, that woman is phenomenal. What she knows and what she allows, it's not only that she knows this, but she's also allowing these things to come in and just be a vessel and tell her who needs to be singing. Because right. The same thing for you is, me having to now say yes to these things made me a stronger person. So now, I think I've been in the choir probably 8 years now, but now it's like, I'll take the mic. But before it was like terrifying. And I remember my first solo, going into a trance, and there's on the recording, the actual video, you see me shake my hand like this. And the guy said to me, he said, "Why did you shake your hand like that?" I said, "I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe it was something that's coming that was just holding the mic. I have no idea." But I want to go back to you talking about, because you said you were a cellist, and I did not know that. And I had a conversation with somebody on here recently. We were talking about music, and I said, there's something, yes, training comes first, and you need that foundation, you need that classical training, but I really have a deep admiration for the musician who can just vamp. And so what I love about the Agape band, those dudes have been around the world, been so trained, but you could just say, "Hey, we're going to play this," and they just start playing. And I noticed the difference of freedom and liberation in that, as opposed to like artists who have to stay on the page. And I watch them trying to get the measurement. Okay, well, that's a quarter of it. Well, I'll have to break it down. And I'm just like, this is not fun, man. Mm-hmm. Like, just play something and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I give the freedom.
Oh my goodness, so much freedom. And, it's almost like being able to have that structure first, so it's almost like being able to have the skills and the tools, and then knowing when to let it go.
Right.
And that's been a big part of it for me too. Is like, you know, it's great to have that training in the beginning, but at some point you've got to be able to let it go.
Yeah.
So, you know, the musicians that you mentioned that are Agape are incredible musicians. And I bet if we looked at either they had some kind of amazing formal training or they were self-taught, you know, whichever way it went.
Right.
And because of the craft, the way they've perfected their craft, now they can just have fun and play. They can let it go and just rest in what they know.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the beauty. I think that's a huge point. And because I was classical, and I never got to do that until I moved into an improvisational space. And that's the beauty of improvisation, right? So it took me out of my classical, you know, brain, and where I have to be able to rely on everything. It kind of shook me, and there was a great deal of anxiety. I'm not saying that that's a bridge that to cross that's easy. That's very anxiety provoking, you know, to take away a person's structure and safety and security. You know, improvising is like basically going outside of your, you know, your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And as we know, that's where all the magic lies. You know, you always hear that, and it's true. And so that playfulness and that improvising is where all the magic lies. And and just to kind of like loop this into the present moment, I'm having to do a lot of that now because of the quarantine and because of the pandemic and the what that lights up in me in terms of survival and fear and body and anxiety. There have been moments where I have not been able to really feel creative, so to speak. And what I realize in those moments is that it's not as important for me to create in that moment as it is for me to ground in that moment. So I have had to ground and ground and ground and be grounded because I can't be creative or expect myself to be creative if I am anxious or if I'm in fear. Maslow talks about this. If you're in survival, you know, that's like the bottom of the pyramid, and inspiration and creativity is like up here. You got to move out of survival to get back to that space where you feel expanded enough to pull something from that non-ordinary reality and activate something that's never been seen or done before, right? Which is pretty much what creativity is, you know, but how can we expect to do that if we're stuck in fear? And planet's in a lot of fear right now, you know? And so even if you're not in fear, you may be just picking up on the energy of the fear. And so I just wanted to say that before we wrap, because I feel like I'm working and meeting a lot of creatives that are being really hard on themselves about not being able to operate at the level in which you're used to operating. And sometimes what the job is right now is, instead of worrying about creating something, sometimes the job is to just ground and come back into the body.
Right.
Whatever your practice is around that, because we can't create if we're not in our bodies.
Right.
And anxiety takes you out of your body
instantaneously. Exactly. Instantaneously. And so a grounding process could be meditation. It could be rest. It could be a walk. It could be listening to music.
Yep. Anything that brings you into the present moment and begins to reconnect you to your center. And the way you know you found it is when you're not anxious and you're not depressed and you're not feeling heavy and you're not seeing flashes of the news in your head. And, you know, the idea of grounding really is to not just to ground the body, but also to begin to bring the awareness of how much energy you're carrying that isn't yours, how much of the static and the chaos is in your space. Because if that static and that chaos is in your space, then it makes it very, very difficult, if not impossible, to create anything. That's the thing. And we're all walking around with it in some version of it. We're all feeling it differently based upon our personal experiences and based upon our belief systems, how much we're resonating with that anxiety and that depression frequency. So yeah, grounding could really be anything. My choice of grounding is meditation and spiritual practice in the morning. Actually seeing and visualizing energy moving through the body, seeing the roots going down to the center of the earth, releasing, bringing my energy back. You know, this is a whole process that I do to help to reconnect. And then from that space, I can kind of go forward my day. But that's also a creative space for me. I kind of historically download ideas when I'm in that space. And
Yes.
that's how my creativity works. And you mentioned that too.
Yeah.
When you said that in the email, I was like, yep, that's where all of those ideas begin to come through. And that's that effortlessness of creative flow, you know. But again, I just want to emphasize, you know, we can't expect that of ourselves as creatives, you know, if we're not, you know, grounded, or if we're in any kind of, you know, anxiety or depression or fear. So my point is saying that is be easy on yourself if you're watching this and you don't
That's
feel
right.
creative.
Yes. And it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay if you're still working through the anxiety, and if it's not alleviating in 30 minutes or an hour, if it's taking a day or two, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to push forward towards creativity because we're watching somebody's brought up, you know, we're looking at social media and we're seeing all people doing all this stuff. It's like, oh, I should be doing that. Should I be doing that? And then that compounds the anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
depression, the sadness, and fears. And yeah, but it is okay.
Yeah, and then the other thing I can just mention too is I'm looking over here because off camera I have a paint by numbers. And I know it sounds really silly, but sometimes you have to do a sideways thing. You got to come at your creativity from another angle without being so direct. You know, I have a 100,000 word book that I wrote last year, and I have to do a second draft. And I have been having a hard time working on the second draft because hello, we're in a pandemic. So what I've been doing is I've been doing these side things. I'll cook something, which is so creative, right? Or I'll do like a little paint by numbers thing, you know? So something that may not be directly, and then eventually I'll bump into what I'm trying to create because I'm kind of going at it from a different angle, you know? So even though paint by numbers sounds very simplistic, it's structured. It allows me to bring myself into the present moment, to ground while still doing something enjoyable and fun. And it takes my mind out of the chaos of what's happening. So always can try something different that you maybe wouldn't expect that could maybe work.
I love that. Yeah, this is exactly where Creative in Quarantine came from, was coming from grounding. It's the one thing that I just have not allowed myself to waver on is morning meditation. And like you, I'm creating something where I have to write it. And I'm creating this program, and I've been on the introduction all month. And it's like, why does it take me so long just to get past the introduction? So then when this came up, Creative in Quarantine, it started with, well, you still have this other thing, and now you're going to drop that thing to go do this thing, and it's incomplete, and all this other. And it's like, no, this was downloaded. And so the curriculum of how this is going to go, the logistics just came through meditation, where I just wrote it all down. It's like, so you can start this now, and then once you start doing this, then the other outlet will start to go back into action. And so I'm finding that as I'm working on this, because this has given me structure, having to organize people and send out emails and calendar and all this other, the lighting, the background, all this other stuff. And then ideas for the curriculum I'm trying to create will peek through and be like, oh, write this down really quickly. And then I'm making sure that I'm putting that into a container where I know how to find it, and then allowing my mind to open up. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so glad that you have that practice and that you're listening, because realistically, that to me is creativity in its essence, is that effortlessness. It's the allowing, you know, for it to come through in that kind of a way. And the meditation is just such a beautiful foundation for that, because it allows us to ground and just be so still so that we can just catch it. And it's not about like trying to go get it. It just can be a vision that gets caught, you know? So I'm so glad that you caught that vision, because I think this is an amazing, you know, topic and conversation. And I think, and I'm just hoping and knowing that so many people will be validated for wherever they are creatively right now.
Yeah, that's my hope. That's my sole intention, is that the people, whoever watches what episode, will get what they need in the moment that they need it. I have no idea what's going to be said, with each one, I'm just like, this is great. I didn't know that about this person, or, you know, whatever artistic information is coming. Like just you talking about the grounding, like I'm like, oh, this episode has to go first, because this is what we're going to lead with for those who feel, because one person did show up and she said, I had not felt creative, and I'm giving myself grace, you know, and I'm like, thank you for knowing that, You know, a lot of people don't know that and beat themselves up about it.
Mm-hmm.
But and then I just want to ask this question really quickly and then come back towards the end. How did you become how did you choose cello?
Oh, that's funny. Well, my best friend, who I adored and just looked up to so much at the time when I was 7 years old, played the string bass, but she was also tall. And so I was like, I want to play the string bass because, you know, you're a kid. I want to do what she's doing, you know? And so unfortunately, I mean, I'm only 5'2" now, so I was definitely really small then. And they were like, you're too short to play the bass. You know, there's no way you're going to be able to play the bass. She's, you know, already like 5'4". She's like 6, you know, or whatever. I don't know what her height was, but she was tall. She's still tall. And so they said, but, you know, the next instrument is, you know, down from that is cello, you know? And so I said, okay, well, I'll take that one then, you know, not knowing the beauty and just the gorgeousness of that instrument and how it would just become like this really incredible expression of, you know, vessel for my creativity to shine through. You know, it's a heart instrument in a sense that it actually physically lays on the heart, you know, when you play it. But it also lays, it actually lines up all the chakras because you have to sit with it between your legs and, you know, you hold it between your knees basically. And, you know, and it just kind of lays, you know, here. And so it, you know, lays on all the chakras. So, yeah. And I had of course, I didn't know any of that, you know, I probably don't even think I've ever verbalized that until just now. But, you know, it's like, well, it does do that, doesn't it? But yeah, so it was funny because this cello thing was happening at the same time as I was rapping and doing shows at school. So I would literally, it's for some reason, you know how things would happen, the classical festivals is what they used to be called, the competitions, it would always happen at the same time as I had a show, a rapper show, like where I was, you know, so I would literally, you know, have a black jeans and, you know, and have a white shirt on with my cello because I had to have black and white on. And then I'd be in the car taking off the white t-shirt and putting on a hoodie and then going to, you know, and I would just seamlessly move between those two, you know, polarities. And keep in mind, this is before people were putting violins and cellos in hip hop music. The two things were very polarized at the time, you know. Yeah, and so it, you know, so again, going back to structure, it provided me a level of structure and discipline that I really needed at the time. I think it worked in tandem with the creative flow of the hip hop. And because the classical music gave me this structure, and I also loved the experience of playing in symphony. So again, going back to community and creativity and community and feeling the harmony of all those instruments together and the magic. I still can remember the emotion of being a part of a symphony and playing along and having that experience, you know. So yeah, it was really, really wonderful. And I probably would have stayed with it, but I began to see the rigidity of it if I had continued to pursue it, you know, as a, you know, past high school and college, if I had gone to Juilliard or Berkeley, if I had done that. And I did not want that for myself. I knew at 17 that I did not want that rigid path that I would have to take to get into a national symphony. Nothing in my body wanted to go into that. And then, of course, later on in life, I met people who had done it, who were in recovery from it, you know, of what it had done to their creative self. And of course, that's not across the board. I'm sure plenty of people do it and love it and they're great, you know, but I knew for me that it wasn't the right way to, wasn't anything to pursue as an actual career.
Understood. Oh, that's lovely. What are you finding inspiring during this time? Where are you getting inspiration during this quarantine?
That is a really good question. I mean, I really feel like I'm getting a lot of inspiration from nature. You know, I always do. And even though I feel like summer's canceled because there's some certain things I would do that I'm not able to do, like swim in the ocean. And, you know, I haven't gotten to the beach. The beach that I want to go to is a little crowded and it's in Orange County. So, they have a different idea of things down there in terms of the social distancing. So, you know, I find little ways to get out and just kind of go sit in my car and be in the park and, you know, and just be outside and be in the sun and be in nature. And so, I mean, I would say that that's definitely what's inspiring me. And I've been watching a lot of stories, watching good shows and really just staying with the writing and the acting and I also have a really wonderful partner, and he's really inspiring, and he's someone I've known for a long time. And that kind of happened right in the beginning of the pandemic. And even though we've known each other for a while. And so that just love and healthy connection has just brought an eternal springtime of my mind as well. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, because that's definitely a part of inspiration.
Yes, exactly.
And I have to say too, on that note, that is the beautiful outpicturing of the inner work, like that. I would not be able to appreciate and be inspired by that external thing as a relationship. I think if I didn't have all of the years of everything we've talked about and so much alone time in those years that we talked about, and so much intentional inner work, then now I can be in a space where I can actually enjoy, another person, so that's pretty inspiring.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I learned at Agape is that nature is constant, and that's the source of all.
Mm-hmm.
Not the job, it's not the money. Nature is God. Nature is the source, and it's always there for us. As long as the sun is coming out and the stars are in the sky and the birds are chirping and there's foliage everywhere. I mean, I don't know if they worry, but at least they're always seeming cheerful to me.
Mm-hmm.
Joy.
Absolutely. And the planet ain't tripping off, what we be tripping off of. Waves still rolling in, birds still singing.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the medicine right there.
Yeah. So are there any projects or anything that you want to let us know about that we could look for? Or you said you have this book, the second draft is coming.
Yes, the second draft of the book is on its way. The book is really exciting. It's about self-worth and the journey to self-worth through a number of narcissistic relationships that taught me how to choose myself. But it's also a lot of the creative process that I've been through, and it kind of parallels with a lot of what we talked about today. So I'm working on that. So that should be out soon. I'm also in private practice, and I'm also really offering a lot of sessions and programs for people right now because of all of the anxiety and the depression. And so that's happening, and I think that's important. And, just wanting to get back to, gigging and singing. So I've been doing a lot of singing and recording on my own. So there's probably going to be some music that's coming out in the next couple of months, as I've been using the time to really utilize my home studio and set up my home studio in that kind of way. So and a lot of things cooking, like some things in the kitchen and just watching the pots, how you do that, and you say, okay,
the cutting, right,
and say which one's going to be the one that's just going to be ready, first, and it's good because, like I said, it's all from the same, focal point of expressing through the voice in service. So I feel like I'll have some more things to announce in the next coming months for sure.
Do you have a title for the book yet?
The working title is "We'll Heal for Love."
Okay.
And it's kind of like a play on that, we'll work for food with the sign.
Oh yeah.
So we'll heal for love. And again, just this erroneous belief that we have to heal people or fix people in order to be loved, and realizing that we don't have to do anything to be loved. We are loved as we are. We are worthy of that love. So.
Well, what I'll do is I will include because your coaching sessions are on your website, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So you could do the website.
So yeah, you'll definitely want to work with Stacie for this. All right, and Virgos get.
Oh yeah, we do not play around. Absolutely, it's the truth. And interestingly enough, I've gotten a lot of growth from learning about my North Node, which is in Scorpio. So those of you all who are interested in astrology, find out what your North Node is. And that really explores destiny and that kind of a thing. So I have a lot of Scorpio energy, which explains why, I have so many of them in my life. So, so that's good to know. But yes, visit the website, fill out a contact form, 30-minute consultation for free. And again, I have very reduced rates just to be able to address what's happening in the world today, for sure.
I love it. Stacie, this is dope.
Oh, I'm so excited. This was wonderful. Thank you so much. You are amazing. I just think you are a star. I always say that. And so whatever you touch or you do, I want to be a part of it. So when you invited me, I was like, hell yeah.
Well, and what the viewers, I was going to say the callers, what the viewers don't know is I had sent out a MailChimp to 50 people, and it was scheduled for 5:15, and you texted me that day at like 5:13 or 5:14. And I was like, this is crazy, but about something unrelated. Right. And I was like, you're going to be getting an email in like a minute.
And I literally saw the email after I hit the send button. And I was like, she can't be getting back to me that fast. Like, so it was, and we hadn't talked or hadn't been in any communication for months. So it wasn't like, you know, so yeah, it was definitely synchronistic. It was divine for sure.
Yes. Which is how we operate anyway. So it's no surprise to us.
Oh yeah, girl. We be flowing and growing through that now space, through that forever space.
That's right.
Yes.
Thank you, Stacie. Thank you for your time.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Be well.
Find Stacie on all social media platforms, links in the description. We hope to see you next week, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.